Breaking news. Chaos erupts in the standard metagame featuring Spotlight Baltimore, with an unexpected build taking the tournament by storm. But Baltimore wasn't the only standard event this last week. Rictus, we're turning over to you. What's the forecast look like in Standard Land?
Forecast this week is cauldrony, with a fair chance of slick shot show-offs going full bore, but don't be surprised if you find a curious Kaito at your local game store. With a ban on the horizon, it's time to take another look at our... Good morning, Rebels. Today we've got the results of 18 tournaments to analyze. So let's start with the deck that snuck in and stole everyone's lunch, Red Aggro. While this one has a light splash into black, we all know that at heart this is Mono Red. Boasting 4 trophies and 22% of the meta, Mono Red has stabilized as one of 2 pillars in Tier 1, hellbent on taking down King Cauldron once more. Congrats to Alex for winning Spotlight Baltimore by taking it back to a foot race and using ley lines to accelerate.
Coming in second with 8 trophies and 36% of the meta is King Cauldron once more. While many may argue this deserves the top spot, the archetype was routinely trounced by Leyline Red, reminding the world that while Vivi is ban-worthy, there are still paths through it. Let's note that between Red and Vivi, 66% of all trophies are accounted for. Utter dominance.
Rounding out our Tier 1 options is Dimir once more, climbing back with 13% of the meta, though notably 0 trophies once again. Don't sell those Kaitos just yet, though. Until we see where the bannings on November 10th go, we won't know just how strong Dimir is in the new meta.
Kicking off our challenger tier is Sultai Bringer, fresh off a hot weekend with 2 trophies and 4% of the meta. Rebels, I've taken a look and there's still no consensus on how to build this deck, so just know that this archetype has plenty of room to evolve still.
Simic Counters drops out of Tier 1 but sticks the landing in Tier 2 this week with 1 trophy and 4% of the meta, a noticeable downtick from the 9% it was boasting last week. Still, it made the top 8 of Spotlight Baltimore, and that proves it out as a viable option moving forward.
Azorius Control rounds out our challenger tier, back from the dead with a 6% meta share this week, though no trophies still. Stay tuned, because we've got some thoughts on why this came out of left field.
Over in Brewer's Corner, I've got a sweet Azorius Auras deck to showcase for y'all.
And I've got a mono blue control list that finally tries to break Hydro-Man, Fluid Felon, but first, let's kick off our archetype breakdowns, starting with Leyline Red. Alex McIsaac won Spotlight Baltimore, a 546-player Grand Prix with the fastest version of Mono Red that we've seen since the Rage ban. Rictus, why this build over traditional Mono Red?
I mean, honestly, this gets back to some theory we were working on about 2 months ago, if you recall, when we were dealing with Taurine Maulers and we were flipping over to Manifold Mice, and we were playing Dreadmaws Ire, and it was working so well against Cauldron, and I think that's a huge part of why they went back to it, because this is a deck that is getting under Cauldron, and that's kind of what you have to do, because Cauldron is not a deck that you can reliably go over. They outscale almost every deck in the format. That combo is just a grind to get past, right? But Bird is the word, slick shot show off, still the fastest in the world, and this is again an unfair game plan with many hands having the proverbial hold up mana or die next turn. Let's also note in that sideboard, those Fanatical Firebrands are spicy against Dimir Tempo and Simic Counters right now, so that's a nice nod to where the meta's going, as is the fact that we have Ghost Vacuums for the Bringer decks, Needleheads for Cauldron, and just generally speaking, a nice balanced sideboard minus that Poison Dart Frog.
Got all the Poison Dart Frog, of course. How long do you think this will be the top red deck of the format, or will we go back to the other one pretty soon?
I don't think it lasts. Every time we've seen Leyline Red pop up, it's been for a tournament, and then, you know, people mess with it and it makes a couple of top 8s in the subsequent weeks, but people are ready for it. Nobody likes losing to this deck, and like in particular, nobody likes losing to the fastest version of Red. So I expect the meta to adjust heavily and include a lot of removal and a lot of early interaction for it moving forward. And let's also note that like Simic Counters actually has some pretty good plan for this if they start shifting those sideboard slots, because Pick Your Poison still blows out Leyline on turn 1. And that's not a small thing to be able to do. So I don't think it lasts that long, honestly.
I think you're right on that. Well, while McIsaac was cooking in Baltimore, they weren't the only one. We've got a ton of mana cooking in the Cauldron once more with Vivi.
Itai Kurtzman took second at Spotlight Baltimore with Vivi's Last Ride, proving consistency was a better move than hedging slots in the main for the mirror. Now, Athena, why the return to arguably the most basic build of Cauldron?
Well, plain and simple. In a long event, consistency is king. And Rictus, Simple and clean is the way that this list is making me feel tonight. It's hard to let go of how powerful the Cauldron combo is, and we want to let it do its thing more often. We do have our 2 of a Braid in the main for the amount of Cauldron mirrors, but that's about the most we're hedging, right? The 3 Quantum Riddlers are actually pretty interesting here, right? Usually you only see 2, maybe 1 in the main, but this does let you grind harder, especially when you get into those kind of grindier matchups, right? Where you need the card draw to keep going. The sideboard is actually just like regular Cauldron decks. I just wanted to point this out, looking to diversify the answers more than the threats. The deck already provides like 3 or 4 different avenues of threats, and so we're just sort of rounding out our answers. More annuls, unable to scream, torch the towers, etc., that help you actually deal with the things the other decks in the format are trying to do against you.
So you got a balanced build in the main, you've got a balanced sideboard where you can flip somewhere between 6 to 8 slots on any given matchup because the diversification of answers is there. But do you think this archetype survives the bannings as like, Izzet prowess?
I mean, I think prowess is a different deck entirely. I think if they ban just Cauldron, then that deck can exist because Vivi is a good card, and just playing Vivi by itself in a more prowessy shell with Astrologian's Planisphere and things, that's something we saw sort of last set a little bit towards the beginning. But I think if they ban Vivi and Cauldron, then I think people are just going to play Oculus, right? Either Jeskai Oculus or just plain old Izzet Profts, right? The Profts engine is just so good. And I mean, we saw Jeskai Oculus do really, really well before rotation, right? And it just hasn't really lost anything. If anything, it's gained a few tools, right? So yeah, I would expect Oculus to be the best deck if they don't ban Profts at all.
Yeah, if they're not going to touch Profts, it's going to be a problem in like 2 or 3 other archetypes potentially. And you're absolutely right. Like Oculus, it could be a problem very, very quickly. But, speaking of archetypes with serious question marks next to their name as we await November 10th, let's hop over to a deck that has been praying for Cauldron Band for months. Dimir Tempo.
Kevin Thanikit made the top 32 of Spotlight Baltimore with Dimir Tempo, the highest finish for this archetype at the tournament. Rictus, we all know this deck struggles in the VV meta. Does this build work in a post-Cauldron meta?
Kind of depends on the bans, right? Like if we just see Vivi get banned, literally nothing else, this goes back to a strong tier 1 standing potentially, but you're still going to have to contend with Jeskai Oculus having the Profts engine, and you're going to have to contend with Simic Counters going under you and being just kind of a nightmare if you're a non-sweeper based removal suite. So, cards like 0 Point Ballad may become more of a staple to counter that swarm strategy, or it might just be too slow and Simic Counters gets under this one entirely. That said, this is also an archetype that's not safe. Enduring Curiosity is definitely getting looked at, and I don't think they're going to ban Kaito because fundamentally there's nothing unfair about what Kaito is doing. It's got very simple answers in the format, Bitter Triumph exists, etc. But Curiosity has been just a pain for everybody on the snowballing of Dimir Tempo, and it's kind of just been the backbreaker for so many years now. Like it's been a problem.
For sure. Last week, we kind of saw this build kind of moving towards more Dimir mid-range, right? The Quantum Riddlers, an Elegy Acolyte in the main, and that build used Bitter Triumph as its main removal spell because you could actually use the discard to your advantage by using the Riddler draw afterwards, right? But how much of a liability is Bitter Triumph in your removal suite if you don't have that in your such a fast format? You will have to pay the life pretty often, right?
Yeah, if you have to pay the life and you're playing up against mono red, it is horrific because now you're bolting yourself to try to keep a threat off the board that's not where you want to be. And red isn't really into planeswalkers. Like we don't have a walker heavy format at the moment. We just kind of have Kaito and occasionally an Elspeth slings in or an Ugin. But in general, I haven't really seen a massive upside to Bitter Triumph unless you're in like Sultai, where you want to actively discard cards and get them into your graveyard. So it feels like more of a liability that they decided they wanted for the mirror match, where Kaito is a bigger deal on resolving and keeping on the battlefield. But like at less than 15% of the meta, I'm not as concerned with the mirror, to be honest. So personally, I think it's too much of a liability right now.
That makes sense. I think I tend to agree with you with that. I think that Bitter Triumph is pretty hard to use right now. You either need some kind of payoff for the discard, or you need to not be caring as much about the life gain in certain metas, right? But with Dimir in tier 1 again, control and combo decks beware. But here's a fairly resilient combo deck that won't just fold entirely to Dimir though. Sultai Bringer.
Chase Santayana won a 41-player RCQ in Baltimore on Friday with Sultai Bringer, marking the latest evolution for the archetype. Athena, we've seen a multitude of builds lately. Why do you like this one in particular?
Man, this build is weird. You see all kinds of cool things here, right? We're playing Cash Grab as the secondary mill fort of choice, which is something I've argued with before, because it lets you hold up your removal turn 2 in case you need it, or Cash Grab if you don't, right? All the control players know about that kind of line. But the card that's really interesting here is Kitsa Otterball Elite. It's a little confusing to me. We only have 7 spells to copy in the entire main deck. But, I mean, it is a looter. It has high toughness, right? It could be kind of a decent hedge for the aggro matchups, right? The 2 Emmet Selches in the main have, it's a nice grindy 3-drop, right? We've kind of questioned back and forth what the 3-drop is going to be in this slot after Awaken, right? Because you have a lot of kind of pieces that are vying for that spot. And I think Emmet Selch does it fairly well. Not a bad option with all the looting. And the flip side of it can end games super fast if you can hit it.
That's fair. I guess the kit says sometimes you get a cute little, it turns into a 5/5 off Arden, so now its power like auto activates its ability every time, but like, I don't know. That feels a little odd. That said, Molt Tender is the card I'm most curious about. Is it Llanowar Elves for Reanimator in your opinion?
I don't think you can compare Molt Tender to Llanowar Elves. I've played a lot of Golgari Roots pre-rotation when we had Tyvar and it was a good deck. And Molt Tender was never Llanowar Elves, right? It's the same with Gene Pollinator and Simic. They're not real Llanowar Elves because you can't play a 3-drop afterwards, but they do accelerate your game plan really, really fast once you get to a certain point, right? It's just a really nice 1-drop to have that can get you some extra mana. It can fill your graveyard, things of that nature. So I do think it's a really good card, but I would be hesitant to compare it to Llanowar Elves in any sense.
Yeah, the games aren't necessarily going long enough that you're going to get that activated ability more than once or twice at most. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, Athena, some decks, they want to cast Living End, others embrace Roid Rage. So let's take a look at our local gym rat, Simic Ouroboros Roids.
Kellen Pastor, I hope I'm saying that right, made the top 8 of Spotlight Baltimore with Simic Counters before falling in the top 8 to the eventual winner Leyline Red. Rictus, is this deck a legitimate contender even before the bans?
I'd have to say yes. We saw it make it to the top 8 of Spotlight Baltimore, and it might have made it farther, Athena, except for the matchup against Leyline Red. And if you look at that sideboard, I don't know why, but they went with Insidious Fungus instead of Pick Your Poisons, and that can't have been a good call when your opponent's playing Leylines against you. So it does keep pace with Cauldron. It punishes the non-combo draws that they have heavily. And if they push into a non-sweeper removal suite, we win that game, right? Furthermore, you have Keen-Eyed Curator in the main. It does a fantastic job of layering our protection against them, and Riddler is spicy given how fast we enjoy our hand. But at the same time, I look at this and I just don't know why we're not playing Pick Your Poison in this format when it answers so much of what Cauldron is doing at 1 mana, and it also happens to have decent benefits against a lot of what the rest of the format's trying to do.
Yeah, I've been a big proponent of Pick Your Poison for this. And to be fair to Kellen Pastor, I don't think anyone was expecting Leyline Red to be a top 8 deck at this tournament. So I totally understand not running it for that reason, right? But I do have a question. One thing that we were worried about with this deck going into Baltimore was we thought we would see a lot more Jeskai control at this tournament with split ups. Does this deck have a plan for sweepers if that deck sort of pops back up?
So it depends on the nature of the sweeper, right? If you're going to have a damaged base kind of removal, then we just outscale, and that's the plan. We have Paw Patches, we've got Innkeeper's Talent, we've got Roids. So just use your Roids, keep pushing further. You'll get away from Fire Magic's Clasm effects pretty quickly. But if we're talking about Wrath effects that are not damage-based, 0-point Ballad, Split Up, Day of Judgment, Ultima, counterspells. That's really what it boils down to. You are going to have to counter those, or you're going to have to learn how to not overextend into those, despite the fact that you are a swarm strategy. And that's not easy. That's going to be the weak point of the deck when you really boil it down. And to get around that, you have to fundamentally hedge way harder, which is a problem. And we've talked about this before, where you just overhedge because you don't want to have any bad matchups, so then you screw up the good matchups you do have trying to beat the matchups you're bad about. And I don't think the Jeskai Control, especially that 4-color Dark Jeskai deck, I don't think we're winning that one routinely as long as they have sufficient sweepers, and that's okay, because that's not the deck we're trying to beat with this. We're trying to upend Mono Red and Cauldron, and when that's over 50% of the meta, that's just a smart meta call.
I can see that. I think that, I guess to note, 0 Point Ballad is also sort of a damage-based removal because it's based on the toughness of the creature you're trying to remove. So I do think that Sweeper is a little bit weak against this deck anyway, but black doesn't really have any better options, right? But as you said, Simic looks to punish Cauldron by being aggressive, playing to the board, but is it the only option available? Next, we're looking at Azorius Control.
Ito Ryo made it to the finals of last Saturday's 49-player Champion Cup qualifier in Japan with Azorius Control before losing to Cauldron. Athena, are you ready to shuffle up the latest evolution?
I absolutely refuse to play Temple of Enlightenment in my deck in 2025 Standard. It's not happening. But that said, otherwise, this deck seems like it's aiming at Cauldron with pretty high hopes, right? Seam Rip, Get Lost, Essence Scatter, even just Day of Judgment, No More Lies. These are all good cards into Cauldron, right? And we have the 3 Bezas in the main to respect the Mono Red and Simic matchups. And I think it does a pretty good job at helping in both to at least stall the game out a little, right? In the sideboard, we're seeing the return of Overlord of the Mistmoors, right? Triumphant return. We're super scared of Dimir, as always, right? And this is especially going to be a problem post-rotation, right? Or I say rotation, post-bans, when we get a little bit of a new format, right? Where Dimir is going to be a little bit more of a contender, so we have to be a little bit more scared.
I mean, I think it's almost fair to call it a rotation given how much it's going to shake up the meta, right? Like this ban is, if it's only 1 card, okay, it's not a rotation, but if they ban what they should, in our opinion, it's going to be like a rotation. You take out 3 to 5 flagship cards, and it's like you rotated the format in a way. But I look at this list, Athena, and it's got 6 colorless lands in a deck running 4 copies of No More Lies. Do you think that's a wise move right now?
I would say probably not. We have tested a whole lot of Azorius Control between the 2 of us and other team members, right, across the years. I remember this big discussion we had with one of the team members, Cody with a K, for a good while on how many colorless lands you can run if you're running things like Helix and No More Lies. Our general consensus was 4, even though 4 is still kind of pushing it a little bit. I think the right balance is usually 2 Fountain Port, 2 Demolition Field right now, right? I think any more than that, you start to have problems with being able to hit both colors on turn 2. I think that unless you get like a Yorion sort of card in the format that lets you increase the number of cards in your deck reasonably, you should probably only have 4.
Yeah, and even though they're running, 27 lands, and you factor out 6 colorless lands, now you have 21 sources. That's a little rough even for No More Lies, right? Like we're still on the cusp of that being a really big problem and having too many hands where it's a 3-drop, not a 2-drop. And in this format, it's so fast. I feel like you can't afford for that to happen. But, speaking of Azorius decks that are looking to make a comeback, let's kick off Brewer's Corner by taking a look at the only deck with serious aura. Rookie made it to the top 32 of Spotlight Baltimore with Azorius Auras, stunning and otherwise fairly bland day 2. I love where this deck went. It got so many tools over the last few sets, and I'm here for it. Like, first of all, we got Seam Rip. It revived Oculus. Why shouldn't it revive this one? We finally have a one mana removal spell that plays into the central synergistic strategy of Enchantress. Hell yes. Origin of Spider-Man, aka a most helpful Weaver, is also one hell of a clock. That double strike, when you pair it with anything that has ethereal armor, that's going to end the game in a hurry. And again, this is a deck that can play Rest in Peace and not care. We don't need the graveyard. They do. We can absolutely obliterate it, and it does synergize well with giving us extra cards off Entity Tracker. This is a tight list. It's a smart list. It was a really clever play going into this tournament. My guess is it's a little underpowered, so to speak, but at the same time, if I'm a mono red player, this list is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying, because they can so quickly scale out of reach with an ethereal armor and then go into Sheltered by Ghosts, and you're done. You're just done.
This deck has always reminded me of life gain decks a bit because it's an A+B deck, right? You need your enchantments and you need your enchantment payoffs. So you can have a lot of hands that are just, I have a bunch of payoffs but no enchantments, or I have a bunch of enchantments but no payoffs, right? And so I think that's the biggest issue with these sorts of decks, but they can definitely still be strong, right? As we've seen. Looking at a deck that kind of has, again, kind of a similar issue, right? You have your threats but not your answers. I'm going to be looking at mono blue tempo control. So, Alex Fear Gang, Fire Gang, I hope I'm saying that right, took this list to third in a 4 p.m. Friday RCQ at SCGCon Baltimore. I never thought I'd see this deck again. What the hell, Rictus? Belly and the Parched is a key card out of the new set for blue tempo decks. It allows you to sort of cheat on mana as long as you're casting spells on both players' turns. At the end of the day, we're a Terror Crab deck, right? We're mimicking the Simic Beans deck of pre-rotation or the blue Terror decks of Pauper, right? It's always been this kind of strong shell to just play a bunch of non-creature spells and then finish it off with these big threats at the end, right? Lots of interaction and card draw. 4 Long Rivers Pull. Really nice in a mono blue deck because of the flexibility, right? It's such a strong card when you look at it from the amount of things that it can counter. And when you're playing a deck like this, right? This isn't a pure control deck. You're not trying to take it to the very late stages of the game, grind them out, right? You're trying to sort of hit that sweet spot of like, okay, we've stopped everything they're doing. They need a second to stabilize. Now we can land our terrors, we can land our crabs, our meringues, and just go. And so giving the opponent an extra card is a little less damning than in a control deck.
Absolutely. And I mean, I look at a deck like this and Long Rivers Pull, this is like one of the only scenarios where it actually works, because not only do you hit that blue easily, but it's one of the few scenarios where you go, yeah, I don't mind gifting you the card if it means that we counter the sweeper before we take the game down, you know? And most of the time you don't need to, because we are a very creature heavy format at the moment, and being able to counter that turn 3 Steam Core, Vivi, FOMO, depending on how slow they go with it, like, it's huge. It's huge. Like, it's getting to play 4 flexible Essence Scatter in the main, and that's such a smart play given where the format's been. So I love it for that. But let's take it down to the final 2 decks here, ahead of the curve. Folks, let's take a look at a little bit of Sultai Bringer. Alrighty, so this is my own build. I've been modifying it heavily as we go. I started messing around with the idea of what if we don't mess with Cache Grab and we go to Scout the City instead, because the life gain is relevant right now. There's so much mono red running around. And as we kept doing that, I kept thinking, what if we also played Mr. Negative, aka Wither Cocoon Keeper? Now, worth noting, if they do hit you with that whole Nemesis Wombo combo and emblem you, Wither will not give you life when you swap, which sucks, but it does still take their life down to whatever they had you at. So you can very often resolve it, and as long as you have any other creature swinging, that's going to be game right there. It's a really fun card to get off of an Arden, because it almost always ends the game on the spot. So I love this as a little bit of tech. Time will tell if it's the right one. Obviously, it's going to do worse against decks that are not doing linear damage, but exponential damage, such as Leyline Red. But, you know, again, Leyline Red, how long can the deck really last before it gets put back on the shelf because everybody's tired of it? Hard to say.
This is just the deck that needs that Lorwyn Elf so badly, right? We keep looking at all these different flex slots that this deck can have, but at the end of the day, as soon as that John Emmanuel Duprov World Championship card comes out in Lorwyn, all those flex ideas are gone, and we're just putting probably 4 of those in this deck, right?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I also love that we're at a point where none of us remember the name of the damn card, but we remember that it's John Emmanuel Dupraz's card immediately. Like, I could not tell you the name of the card, but I absolutely know what you're talking about, and I know all the stats. No, I just don't know the freaking name at all. You know what? This is somewhat on Wizards, because like when you split the whole thing with Arena versus Paper, we stopped learning all their names. We just did. We're like, we just need to know what the abilities are, because the name's changing between IP. So we're done trying to memorize names. That said, you know, we may not always know the names of the cards, but we do know the name of this deck, and you've got your own hot take on it. So let's see an evolved version of Simic Counters.
All right, first things first, Rictus, I told you so, right? You said it yourself, this deck probably could have won Baltimore if it didn't hit the most unfortunate matchup in the world in the top 8, right? I think this deck's extremely strong. I think that I think there's a lot of different ways to build this deck, and I don't think there's necessarily one correct way to do it, because this deck is so versatile in what it can do. Red and blue interaction right now are just so strong that you can kind of run any kind of mix of them, right? We've seen decks with 0 interaction in the main do well, right? We've seen decks with Riddlers in the main do well. We've seen decks with Tyvars, Sentinels, Keen-Eyeds in the main, Keen-Eyeds in the side, cutting on numbers here and there, right? We're just kind of sort of coming together to a build. So this is mine. I'm still super high on Pick Your Poison. I think Pick Your Poison, 1-mana answer to most of the Cauldron deck, if we're being honest, is really, really strong. I'm still really high on Sentinel. I think Sentinel is extremely good against mono red. One thing I've noticed a lot playing in this format is that Quantum Riddler in this deck is insane, right? You just empty your hand so quickly that getting that draw 2 on the warp, and then you actually have enough mana to play it later through all of your mana dorks to just get it again.
Yeah, I'm with you. And again, this is a deck that goes so fast with the Gene Pollinators and Elves that it really gets to abuse what Riddler is trying to do, which is blow your load as fast as you can and then refill. But, end of the day, Athena, it's spooky season. So we won't blame you for wanting to stir the cauldron one last time, but make sure you're ready because winter is coming. And with it, Vivi will fall like the leaves on that autumnal tree you can't stop talking about. So comment below with your picks for cards that need to be banned on November 10th, and let's debate that in the comment section.
Rebel outtakes are loading, so stick around. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in November. Until then, untap, upkeep, resist. You played StarCraft, I played Age of Empires. We both had our RTS roots, it looks like.
It all begins with resource management. Yes, indeed.
Yep, of course. And now we're control players. Look at us. The world hates us, Rictus. See how far we've come? Bravo to us.
My older brother and I, we were raised to just go at it with each other on every sport growing up from the start. And it was at the point where, like, if one of us, we played a lot of basketball outside, right? And if one of us won, the other one would kick the ball into Poison Ivy and tell the other one that if they wanted a rematch, they had to go get the fucking ball. Like, we were fucking brutal towards each other. At one point,
shit.
I literally have a hole in my left leg because we were playing basketball and I had my bike parked behind the hoop. And I went up for a layup, and my brother was not having it, so he just fucking hit me midair full on like a linebacker. I flew under the hoop into the bike, and the kickstand went right through my leg.
Holy shit. I was probably like 7 or 8 at this point, and we would literally just beat each other with sticks. Welcome to Midwest. Yeah.